Hello everyone, today you will hear an interesting story. The day was hotter than ever. The young company had gathered by the river to swim in the water and keep their bodies from drying out in the scorching sun. The van in which they had arrived was not far from the bank, near a large deciduous tree. A picnic area had been set up in the shade of the tree. 3 young couples had gathered to relax that afternoon and have a good time. 2 of the girls were sitting on blankets on the beach, watching their third friend take a relaxing dip in the water, surrounded by 3 guys, one of whom she was dating. The other 2 were just friendly company. "Don't you think Meg is a little too relaxed?" asked one of the people sitting on the bank to their companion, watching their friend in the water, letting all 3 boys splash water on her, and laughing happily with them. "I think this is her usual behavior. I don't remember her ever portraying modesty." Meg was a beautiful and shapely girl. She was also very uninhibited and loved the attention of guys. She was now dating Dean and tried to be more careful in her relationships with her admirers. After enjoying themselves in the water, their friends went to the beach and joined their friends who had already taken out a beer from the cooler bag by the time they arrived. Each guy sat closer to his companion, some cuddling, some just sitting next to her, and everyone started discussing youth life. Later, Dean invited Meg to take a walk along the shore, away from the others, to a secluded spot with a beautiful view of the river and the opposite leafy bank. "Meg," he took her hand and looked into her eyes. "Yes, Dean? You know how much I love you, don't you?" He turned to her with all seriousness. "You scare me." Meg furrowed her brow. "Honey, I feel so good with you. I wouldn't want to ever part with you." He reached into the pocket of his shorts and pulled out a small dark blue velvet box. "Meg," he saw the interested gaze of the girl and smoothly opened the box. "Will you agree to be my wife?" Meg was delighted when she saw the huge jewel. She loved jewelry, and this ring just enchanted her with its shimmering facets in the sun. "Oh, Dean," she flicked her gaze back and forth between the ring and the boy. "Of course I agree." Dean solemnly slipped the ring onto the thin finger of his girlfriend's hand, and they sealed their agreement with a strong, passionate kiss. In no time, they were married, and their marriage took place in peace and harmony. Meg now devoted a lot of time to her family and stopped flirting with other guys. Her friends were genuinely surprised at the change in her character. In response, she said that she really loved her chosen one, and did not want to hurt him. So several years went by. Dean was busy with his work. And Meg, who had always loved to party, opened her own bar with a dance floor. She remained as beautiful as ever, and her admirers did not dwindle, but she kept them at a distance and remained a faithful wife. One summer, one of her friends, Karen, decided to throw a huge party to celebrate her birthday. She invited a lot of friends and invited Meg first. "I don't even know. Dean's on a business trip. He won't be back for a few days," Meg said, doubting the girl's impending choice. "Well, that's great. You'll get some rest and get away from the family routine. There'll be a lot of our old acquaintances. Come on, girlfriend. I'll be very offended if you say no." Meg hesitated a little more with her answer, but finally agreed. After that, the girls went to the boutique to pick up new outfits for the party. The party was held at Karen's house, and all the guests were mostly gathered on the lower floor. There were a lot of people, but everyone was comfortably seated, finding a secluded place for themselves. The music played loudly and, under the influence of alcohol, beat rhythmically through the bodies of those present. Some were dancing, others were stomping to the rhythm with a glass in hand, and some were engaged in passionate conversations with old acquaintances. Many of the guests had found a date for the evening, and some had already gone somewhere private. Meg avoided the close company of men, and although many tried to pay her attention, she did not fall for their tricks. Karen occasionally approached her with conversations and offers of amusement. She was even a little jealous of her friend, as she herself was still single and unmarried, and men did not spoil her with as much attention as she would have liked. "I couldn't help but notice your loneliness," another suitor said to Meg as she sat at a table away from the music speakers, enjoying a unique cocktail from Karen's family recipe. "Do I know you?" Meg asked. "I don't think so." I'm new in town, but I've managed to get the hang of it. My name is Alex. It's a pleasure, Meg. Why are you alone, Meg? Alex asked with a hopeful tone. He was several years older than Meg, and his charming and easygoing style showed that he was not poor. Meg looked at him from head to toe, feeling something inside pushing her to agree to spend the rest of the evening in his company. "Oh, Meg, I see you're not bored anymore," Karen said happily in her ear, slightly tipsy and unsteady on her feet. Karen had also found a date for the night. On the night of the party, Meg's new boyfriend was hardly ever away from her. "Yeah, I'm having more fun already," Meg smiled back. "How would you like to get some fresh air?" Alex suggested. "I'd love to." Meg supported the idea. They walked out onto the terrace and went to the far, dimly lit corner where no one would disturb them. Meg and Alex struck up a casual conversation, with him talking a little about himself and Meg sharing a few moments of her life. During the course of the conversation, Meg noticed that she was magnetically drawn to Alex. Either his charm worked that way, or the cocktail was doing its job. But Meg seemed to melt in her new feelings, and the man's soft baritone seemed to be beckoning her into his net. "You're so beautiful." Alex touched her chin with a bent finger and slowly leaned his lips against hers. Meg didn't resist. On the contrary, she loved it and didn't want to push the moment away. She responded to the kiss, and Meg and Alex spent that night together at his house. In the morning, Meg, after all, came back to reality. Even though she was overwhelmed with pleasant feelings, she decided not to do it again because she loved Dean. She didn't rush home and decided to stick around a little longer and talk to Alex. "Hey, did you sleep well?" Alex said hello when she was already dressed and sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee. "Yeah, I slept great," Meg replied. "Alex, we need to talk." "Yeah? About what?" "It's been a great night, but we need to break up. I'm married and we don't need to see each other anymore. It's better to never see each other at all. So if you liked it, why not do it again? It's just a husband. Do you think he's so faithful to you? Come on, we're all human." "No, I don't want any more relationships on the side. It was a one-time thing, and it was an accident. Let's just break up, that's all." "I have to go," Meg said, putting her cup on the table and grabbing her purse. As she headed for the exit, Alex paused her by grabbing her elbow. "Do you think you can just ditch me like that now?" "We'll meet again, and more than once." He let go of her hand. Meg said nothing in reply. She just hurried out of his house. Alex's pride was hurt by Meg's words. He liked her, but since his ego was hurt, he decided not to leave it like that. He found out where Meg's bar was and began to frequent it. Sometimes he would sit down in the far corner and just watch her, and sometimes he would sit at the bar and try to make conversation with her, but she would constantly find excuses to avoid talking to him. But Alex didn't back down. He wasn't willing to let her go just like that. He began to stalk her. Sometimes he met her at home with a bouquet of flowers. Sometimes he caught her halfway to work and followed her the rest of the way. "Alex, stop following me," she said. "I told you we can't be together." "Why not?" he asked. "You had a very different opinion that night," he smirked. "I can see in your eyes that you want me." He took a step toward her, wanting to hug her, but Meg pulled away. "Go away. Leave me alone. I don't want to see you." She continued on her way, with Alex keeping up with her. "Meg, you can't forget everything," he said. "Yes?" They had already reached the back door of the bar when Alex grabbed Meg by the shoulders and pressed her against the door. He leaned down to her neck and smelled her skin. "Oh no, Meg. You still want me," he said softly. Meg twisted out of his grasp and stepped inside the building, slamming the door in Alex's face. Meanwhile, Dean, not being deaf and blind, heard from neighbors and acquaintances that his wife had a new suitor who wouldn't leave her alone. They were often seen together at home, in town, or at work. Knowing his wife's character and hobbies, he couldn't ignore the rumors and decided to secretly follow Meg. Deep down, he hoped it was just a rumor, but the feeling of jealousy wouldn't leave him. He went to the bar where Meg worked and found a comfortable spot near the bar, where he could see everything clearly without being noticed. He didn't have to wait long. Dean saw a man who matched the description of his wife's suitor sitting at the counter. Meg, who mostly worked behind the bar, came up to serve the unwanted customer as well. She poured him a shot of whiskey, fulfilling his order. And he, taking a sip, spoke to her again. "Meg, why are you playing hard to get?" he asked. Meg tried to ignore his words, but he wouldn't stop. "You look beautiful tonight, just like the other night. Leave the counter, let's go sit down and talk separately. We have nothing to talk about." The girl cut him off. "Leave me alone," she said. Dean had already begun to calm his suspicions a little, but the next words alerted him even more than before. "Meg, you can't ignore me. I'll never leave your life. The night you agreed to come with me, you agreed to come into my life. And it's not so easy to get out of it. For what? For just drinking in here? Do you have a smoke?" "I'm just chilling. She's just showing off." "Hey, what's going on?" Alex didn't understand. "Did you even know that Meg was married?" Dean asked angrily. "What do you care? Do you want to play with her too?" Alex was still perplexed and his jaw grimaced in pain. Dean hit him again with all his might. "I am her husband." His anger was gathering momentum. He continued to beat Alex until he was completely unconscious. Only then did he leave, leaving his rival lying on the steps with his face smashed in. Dean came home and sat on the couch without turning on the lights. He decided to wait for his wife and talk to her at home. Meg arrived a couple of hours later, seeing from the threshold that the house was dark. She assumed that Dean was already asleep and tried not to make any noise. She cautiously walked down the hall to the living room and, groping her way to the nightlight, turned it on. She flinched in surprise when she saw her husband sitting on the couch with a bottle of beer in his hands, staring intently at her. "Oh, Dean, you scared me," she said. "I thought you'd be asleep by now." "No. As you can see, I'm not." Meg put her purse on the table and started to take off her jacket. "Isn't there anything you want to tell me?" I could feel the indignation in his voice. "No, what am I supposed to tell you? It's just the usual. Lots of customers, some of them clingy like always. Nothing new." Dean took a sip of beer without taking his eyes off his wife. "How long have you had a boyfriend?" Meg wasn't expecting that question, but she knew right away. "Dean, what? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" "I said how long ago?" Dean raged. Meg knew she couldn't get away with it. She cried and told her husband how it had happened, crying and begging for his forgiveness and swearing it would never happen again. But Dean was not convinced by her words. He listened to her cries and looked at his betraying wife with hatred. "Do you take me for a fool? Do you think I'm just going to forgive and forget and continue living in love and harmony?" "Dean, please. It was a big mistake. It was just a blur. I didn't even know how it happened. You're just a dirty whore. You haven't changed. I should never have married you. Marrying you was a mistake." Dean, she cried even more. "Please." Dean couldn't forgive her for cheating. He didn't stay home that night, leaving his wife with her tears and regret. Dean filed for divorce according to the prenuptial agreement, which stated that if one spouse cheated, they would receive nothing after the divorce. And Meg was left with nothing, nowhere to go. She asked to stay with a friend for the first time, and although her friend sheltered her, she was not happy with her help because she already had a boyfriend and was worried that he might succumb to Meg's charms. Meg's life went downhill. She didn't stay with her friend for long. Soon they fought, and Meg had to rent a cheap apartment and take a job at a coffee shop. She tried to start new relationships with men, but they all ended quickly, as Dean called Meg's suitors anonymously and warned them about her true nature and what they could expect in future relationships. Meg never married again, accepting her fate as punishment for her past mistake. Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. If you like our story, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your feedback is highly motivating for us and helps us improve our content.